All right, hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Tonight is Tuesday, September 21st, 2021. This is your evening tropical update. We'll continue to see an active Atlantic basin this evening, two active storms, although pretty questionable if either of these should actually be classified tropical storms tonight. We do have a tropical, well, I think now depression, Peter, actually. So on the way down for Peter, located north of the Antilles tonight, and Tropical Storm Rose hanging on as a heavily shear tropical cyclone well off in the eastern Atlantic part of the basin. We're also tracking an area of interest in the northern Atlantic basin. The remnants of Odette from several days ago have moved up and kind of began to sink southward back to the warmer waters of the central Atlantic. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have Invest 98L. Kind of small on this map, but definitely the next wave to watch and what we'll be focusing most of the video on tonight. So, rest of the U.S. is kind of active right now. A strong cold front moving in through the eastern U.S., and this is definitely going to cool off the eastern U.S. and bring a much cooler fall pattern to start the equinox. The fall equinox is tomorrow, so right on schedule. We'll have the first day of fall. Feel like fall for a lot of folks, and even parts of Florida will be getting in on it as well, so good news there. All right, our evening hurricane center's map, as expected. Peter, Rose, and your two invest, and we will quickly show you Peter and Rose's forecast track, so nothing really to talk about. These storms are junk, and they are of no interest to us. Peter no longer forecast to regenerate south of Bermuda. Yesterday we talked about maybe, towards the weekend this thing might be able to get going again, but it just looks like the wind shear is too much. And this time of year, things do not like to hang out in the central Atlantic because of all the cold fronts and all the increased activity as the fall season begins to transition in. It's just not a great place to be a tropical storm, and that's why we don't see a lot out here. Peter looks like his demise will be sooner than later. Rose, same thing, likely to become a tropical depression by tomorrow and not long after that. Again, both these storms are heavily sheared and they're kind of sloppy. This is the remnants of Odette, at least a little more visually appealing this evening. Definitely a more cold core low right now. A lot of cold air streaming in on the backside of the storm, but a little bit of that thunderstorm activity trying to generate here near the center of circulation. It's definitely entangled in a large cold front. This front will continue to advance. The remnant circulation will probably begin to sink southward as this front and the jet stream leave it behind. The system tonight is over pretty cool waters of the 22, 24 degrees Celsius range in the 70s, but the system is forecast to drift back to warmer water around 27, 28 degrees, which definitely could allow it to regenerate for some tropical characteristics, but it looks like another front will come in a couple days and pick it up, move it out to sea. No threat to us. And that leaves Invest 98L. 8 p.m. update from the National Hurricane Center, recording just after this came out. 90% chance of development, and we can see the Hurricane Center's language has changed a little bit on this from yesterday. They talked about how it might be a couple days. Well, now their language in this block is much more encouraging to think that we're going to have a tropical depression on deck sooner than later. This will be Tropical Depression 18, not 17, as I said last night. But regardless, this will quickly become a Tropical Storm Sam soon after. So the invest looks pretty good tonight. It's not gigantic by any means, but it's a nice little tight wave envelope, and it is gradually becoming better organized. We can see persistent thunderstorm activity throughout the day and into the evening in these brighter clouds here. Definitely some kind of mid-level circulation through the system. Some banding features have been analyzed tonight. FinMock microwave satellite imagery does show there's a couple little curved bands trying to start. Not a whole lot, but there's some early signs of curvature in these bands from the microwave passes. We haven't had a good ASCAT recently. The last one was this morning and it didn't hit the storm, so we don't have any good satellite winds to indicate if we have a surface circulation. That's why the Hurricane Center holding off on actually classifying this, but it is going to definitely be sooner than later in that regard. And as soon as this mid-level circulation works down to the surface, we will have Tropical Storm Sam, or at least Tropical Depression 18. My guess is if this continues by tomorrow night, at this time, we'll have our storm on deck. So obviously the big question is, where the hell is Sam going? And the first answer is, well, we have a pretty good answer and a pretty good idea where this is going for the next couple of days. We think that the system is generally going to move to the west in the central Atlantic, as most of these storms do out here, and then we'll eventually begin to recurve to the northwest. So this is set for tomorrow. We'll go back to Wednesday here. You can see the system not really organized yet by the GFS's standards. We go to Thursday. We definitely have something going on here. We go to Friday. We definitely have an organized storm developing by then. And then Saturday into Sunday into Monday, we have a healthy storm in this region, likely on the border of hurricane status at this point, or if not outright a hurricane by the end of the weekend. weekend and into early next week, we could have a possibly significant hurricane approaching the northern Antilles. Now, this is about where it gets really cloudy. Okay, so this time of year, as we kind of talked about yesterday, we have the fall transition going on. So instead of that nice, big, round high pressures we can track and, oh, it'll go around the high or something, we have this chaos in the atmosphere, the long wave pattern of all these troughs, ridges, cutoff lows, things like that, these perturbations in the flow that really began to shake up how these storms behave and move. And what we have is, instead of, 7 variations of, oh, it's going towards Florida, but is it going to be here, here, or here? We get the variations of, oh, it could do this, or it could do this, or it could do this, because there's so much of a spread in the long range. We talk about 6, 7, 8, 9 days out. When you have this chaotic flow, a lot of different things can happen. So the concern for Sam is that it may not be able to get out to sea as it is currently forecast. So when we're looking at the overall long wave pattern, we have to kind of go over to the 500 millibar chart for the GFS, and we'll compare this with the Euro. But again, this is set for Tuesday of next week. So this is a week from today, a week from this morning, rather. GFS shows a pretty good trough over the eastern U.S. and does think that this is enough to begin to turn Sam to the north. The GFS has generally been buying more of a scenario where the storm is able to turn before the Antilles, before the Bahamas, and go out to sea. And on this particular run this evening, we can see that it does move towards that weakness. Now, what the GFS does by Thursday and Friday of next week is it builds in a strong Atlantic ridge over Canada, and this would typically force the storm back off towards the East Coast. This is a bit of a concerning pattern because you have what is being depicted on this model as some kind of upper low over Florida and the Bahamas, and then you have ridging here, ridging here. Well, the answer means this storm would probably want to go in some kind of capacity and pinwheel back towards the coast. I'm just going with what the model is showing. I'm not saying this is what's going to happen. This is just one possible scenario. However, the GFS, for whatever reason, just crams this into the ridge and never turns it. Now, this is not likely to happen. This is why we have to kind of police our computer models and actually look at what they're telling us, because if you buy this, then, oh, it's going out to sea, except this isn't possible. You can't just cram this storm up under a ridge and just Pirates of the Caribbean music and up through the Atlantic and out to sea. It makes no sense. This pattern, if this came to pass, would likely be a issue for the eastern U.S., and especially like the Carolinas, mid-Atlantic region would definitely have to watch something like this evolve. But that doesn't really mean that this is what is actually going to happen. We go back to Tuesday at 12Z, we'll go over and look at what the European has. European has sort of the same idea, but a little bit of a different evolution. The European has the same trough over the East Coast, has a weakness that Sam is trying to approach. That's why both models generally turn this high pressure off to the west, or off to the east rather. And then the European, I believe, actually takes this up a little more and to the west. Okay, so what the European does is this trough fills in, it exits, high pressure begins to build in north of the storm, and you have it pushed off to the east, or to the west rather, and you have the storm interacting with potentially Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, Northern Virgin Islands, etc. That changes the game completely for the eastern U.S. because on that scenario at 12Z on Thursday, you have this thing being pushed westward into the islands, and that could drastically change the future. You're talking about potential Gulf scenarios, Western Caribbean scenarios, a much weaker storm if it has to go over Puerto Rico and Hispaniola. That changes the game completely, where the GFS, we go to 12Z on Thursday, does not see that ridging. It underestimates that ridging and has it much weaker than the European does and moves it over. So there's a lot of potential scenarios here, and really it's going to depend on the evolution of this large trough over the eastern U.S. going into next week. We know another cold front is going to reinforce the one we're seeing this week, this Tuesday, this Wednesday, this Thursday, and then you kind of have a couple days of a lull, and then another front is wanting to come in. That is going to play a big deal. If that is a particularly strong front, it may be able to weaken this ridge enough here to where Sam is got some path to get out of town. But like the European does, it goes ahead and chops this trough up. It doesn't allow it to fully come down. High pressure builds back in, and then you have a storm moving more westward. This is a potential concern for the Caribbean islands. It's a potential concern for Florida, potential concern for the East Coast. It's even a potential concern for the Gulf of Mexico if this thing got shunted kind of way west and went over here. There's a bunch of different potential solutions, and it's really too early to say. There's a lot of micromanage here. I'll show you the large range computer models. European, definitely buying a lot of strong ensemble members. The stronger it is in the short term, notice how there's a lot of weaker members on the other end of here, are these light blues, light greens, even yellows, indicating tropical storm strength. Notice how most of these are packed off to the west and to the south, whereas some of these darker colors indicating a stronger storm, hurricane intensity, start popping up right here and start pulling northward. The stronger Sam is, the more it's going to generally want to try to come a bit more northward. Weaker storms generally want to go fast and more west. Larger or healthier, stronger storms feel upper level flow better and they want to go north. What we do know is that Sam is only going to move off to the west northwest in the next couple of days. It's going to be somewhere in the vicinity to the east of the Caribbean islands and the Antilles by the weekend, and we know that generally conditions are going to be favorable. We're going to have a healthy upper level pattern. We can see here by Sunday, there's Sam is perfectly positioned at the southwest end of a large anticyclone aloft. This is beautiful outflow conditions. This is going to let the storm breathe in the upper levels. We go back to our water temperatures, 29, 30 degree water. This is red hot water. Don't let that little bit of fall air fool you, because the water temperatures take a lot longer to cool down in the fall than the air temperatures do. So you have very warm water in this region well into October, and that's why the hurricane season does not end until the end of November. So you have plenty of warm water. You have pretty good outflow aloft. There's really no big troughs like we saw with like Peter. We knew that big trough was going to come in and likely rip it apart, and it did. The only thing the GFS shows in the extended term is a trough showing up late in the forecast period. You can see this trough begins to dig down towards the Bahamas and whatnot. This could interact with it at some point, but in this case, Sam was much, much stronger than Peter ever thought about being, and there's no guarantee that that thing weakens necessarily. So there's a lot of solutions on the table, and it's really too early to nail anything down. Again, we are talking about the potential for 7 to 9 days from now before it's even offshore enough to be close enough to threaten. So potentially, we're talking about a threat that's more in the 10 to 12 to 13 day as an actual landfall impact. So it is far too early to worry. But equally, we do see some model indications that this is going to be much more uncomfortable than Peter or Rose or some of these other ones that have recurved have been to date, and we need to watch it carefully. So that's what I got for you guys this evening. Again, high confidence in the next couple of days. From there, not too sure. A lot of models do bring this up to hurricane intensity, some to major hurricane intensity, so we will have to watch that. It is late in the year for this sort of thing, but it is not impossible. We're definitely not out of the time frame where it's out of the realm of plausible. So this has got a long trek ahead of it. Again, curves up like here, and then from here on out, you've got a lot of potential solutions, and we just don't know yet. So that's what I got for you guys this evening on Invest 98L and the rest of your tropics. So we'll keep tracking this, but we get many days to watch it, so stay tuned for updates. Until then, thanks for watching. Have a good one.